From the Rogue Word Studio in Dallas, Texas, it's The Lit Show with Jeremy Fee. New episode each Tuesday. Authors welcome, comments encouraged. Hello everyone, welcome to The Lit Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Fee. As always, I've got something special for you today. It's my reading wrap-up book battle for March 2022 and my April TBR, which includes Continue-A-Thon. But I would also like to talk about maybe some horror mayhem and June on the Range, maybe at least mention them when we get to that last part of the video, TBR. I would love it if you'd leave comments down below, whether you want to tell me which books you're rooting for in the book battle, or how you might have made the decisions differently. You can tell me that you don't like my opinions if you want, and all that good stuff down below. Also, you could make some more reading recommendations for me. Make all your arguments down below. It's always fun to interact with the comments. We had spring break here in March, and during the spring break week, I was pretty much just reading books, either physical books or on my e-reader, or listening to audiobooks, while I did things like spring cleaning and cooking and all of that. I actually read more than 16 books this month. I know, I keep trying to read less so that I have more time for my writing. I did read 4 poetry books that I'm not going to put in the book battle, but I would like to mention them. I read some books that are by Leonard Cohen, and by read them here I mean listen to audiobooks. I was scrolling through my audiobook library in Audible, and I discovered there were a lot of books that were expiring on March 18th. With the Amazon Prime Audible subscription, you know, there are books that you get for quote-unquote free with your subscription, and they were some of the books that I put in my library for free and just figured I'd read them someday, listen to them. They were going to be removed from my audiobook library on March 18th. I went ahead and listened to them. I love poetry anyway. From Leonard Cohen, it's Let Us Compare Mythologies, Stranger, Music, and Book of Mercy. Leonard Cohen is so talented as a singer, songwriter, and poet, so I really enjoyed those. I also went ahead and read Dane Cobain's poetry book. You may know Dane from the YouTube channel Dane Reads. Very entertaining over there with Biggie the Cat and all of his great performances, whether he's reading his own work or reading from others, talking about his reading, video blogs, all that. Highly recommend Dane Reads as a channel, and I also recommend his books, actually reading what Dane Cobain has written. His poetry book is called Eyes Like Lighthouses When the Boats Come Home. A lot of great spoken word poetry in there. He is a performance artist, a spoken word poet. He goes out to bars and places and performs his poetry. There is a lot of vulgar language in there. There is a lot of satire, making fun of political issues and that sort of stuff. So if you like that kind of poetry, I highly recommend it. And now, for our book battle, it's been March Mystery Madness. And in my plan for March Mystery Madness, I wanted to read more books by Dane Cobain. And so here in our first set, our first bracket of the tournament, I've got The Leapfold Mysteries Book 1, Driven by Dane Cobain, and The Leapfold Mysteries Book 2, The Tower Hill Terror. These 2 books have a private eye named Leapfold, and his assistant, who gets hired on, who's a computer hacker, kind of a punk character. Very interesting team. They're fun. They also have a friend on the police force, and so there's a nice chemistry there. Interesting relationship with the police as they investigate these murders. I enjoyed the first book a lot. Dane Cobain does a wonderful job incorporating some newer technology elements into the murder mystery, so it was a lot of fun. At first in the book, when this woman ends up murdered by a car that seems to not have a driver in it, you know, you start thinking, oh, it was somebody who was squatting down, hiding in the car, that sort of stuff. But it very, very quickly becomes obvious that there's technology involved. And then book 2 of the series, The Tower Hill Terror, is a serial killer murder mystery story. And it was really great too. I think that Dane Cobain does a wonderful job writing these murder mystery stories. And since I was enjoying his books, I went ahead and read 2 more books by Dane Cobain in this bracket. Come On Up to the House by Dane Cobain. It's a horror novel. It does have a crossover character from the Leapfold series, just sort of a cameo kind of role appearing a couple times, but that amused me after having read the other books. And then also the kind of weird horror book, No Rest for the Wicked. I enjoyed reading all 4 of those books by Dane Cobain, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you the rest of the books I read before we actually do any book battles competing. For the next bracket, by the way, these are all in reading order of how I read them this month. We've got The Favorite Game and Beautiful Losers by Leonard Cohen. These are technically 2 novels, but you can get them in a combined edition as 1 book. So since I read too much this month, I'm just using the combined edition right here in the bracket. Leonard Cohen doesn't necessarily seem to care about plot in his books. So these were interesting reads, kind of trying to figure out the plot in them. But since he is a poet, it was really nice language. I did enjoy the books, but, we'll have to see how they do in the book battle. Next up is another one of the audiobooks that was expiring, just like The Favorite and Beautiful Losers and those poetry books earlier. It's by Jack Kerouac and William S. Burroughs. It's called And the Hippos Were Boiled in Their Tanks. It's a really interesting book in literature because, my goodness, it was co-authored by Jack Kerouac and William S. Burroughs. It wasn't published while they were alive. It is based on a true story. They changed the names of the people involved, but you can look up the history behind it. There was a situation in real life that these real authors, the beat poets, were involved with their community, in which something horrific happened with their group of friends. There's been a movie made based on the historical events that actually uses the real people's names. So it's very interesting. The movie's not based on this book, but this book and the movie are both based on the same historical events. You can look it up online, research it. Very interesting story, but also very different. Up next was The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. It's classic science fiction. Some people consider it sci-fi horror or sci-fi mystery. I threw it in for March Mystery Madness because I wanted to read mysteries, but I also wanted to read this book specifically because Silvio Moreno Garcia is releasing the book The Daughter of Dr. Moreau. I was able to get an advanced reading copy from NetGalley for Silvio Moreno Garcia's book. I always appreciate that. It was good. It was really interesting to read the original by H.G. Wells back to back with this one. Silvio Moreno Garcia's book is not really a mystery book. In The Island of Dr. Moreau, the main character does end up on a journey of trying to figure out the mystery of what's going on this island and the weird creatures and all of that. In Silvio Moreno Garcia's book, The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, the main character is already there and a part of events, and so it doesn't feel as much like a mystery, though there is a reveal. After that, we'll come up to the next bracket. I listened to the audiobook The Guilty. It's by James Patterson, and I believe a co-author, Dane Swierczynski. As an audiobook production, it says it's exclusive to to Audible. I'm not sure if you can get a copy of it elsewhere. But it was interesting because they had different actors performing the voices for the different characters. And so there wasn't any sense of dialogue tags of he said, she said, but you got to hear different actors portray the different characters. And it's fun to listen to a performance, sort of like a movie without any visuals, telling you the story. It was a very interesting murder mystery, but also very weird. My criticism of it would be, I probably would have enjoyed it much more as a written work, so I'm not sure why they're promoting this as an audio performance. I think it would be better as a published book. The next book that I read for March Mystery Madness was Poirot Investigates by Agatha Christie. I think the character of Hercule Poirot is really interesting. He's an arrogant detective, but a lot of fun. This is a collection of short stories, really, him solving different mysteries. If you like short story mysteries, you're going to be inclined to like it, probably. If you prefer full-length novel mysteries, then you might not enjoy this one as much. Who knows? And then I took on another Agatha Christie, The Body in the Library, which is an Agatha Christie novel that a lot of people really like, and I enjoyed it as well. After that, I read a book that was an author request. I got a free ebook from Michael Schotter wanting me to read The Nemesis Effect. It's science fiction, but I enjoyed it so much I went ahead and bought a copy online as well as an ebook to support the author. In The Nemesis Effect, it's giving you the point of view of a character who's just an ordinary person, and he gets brought into something much larger that's really important to try and save the world. It's sort of a secret, and so I really enjoyed reading that one. I keep saying I really enjoyed reading it for all these books, but it's true. It was a lot of great reading this month. And now for our final bracket, 4 more books. I have been wanting to read the Game of Thrones books, A Song of Ice and Fire series, for a long time. I loved the books so much. I did not find it confusing at all. I had no trouble with the characters and remembering who they were. And I think one of the reasons for that is because in the books, each chapter is labeled with a character's name so that you understand that's the main character to focus on while you're reading that chapter. That's the main point of view that you should care about as you read through that chapter. And I think that's brilliant from George R. R. Martin. A lot of authors do this, of course, from chapter to chapter, following certain characters, but it was much easier than the TV series where you just have all these visuals on the screen and you don't necessarily know which characters you should be following and which ones are more important. For anyone else out there who's been intimidated, maybe putting off reading the series, I just want to throw that out there. It actually ended up being much easier for me than I thought it would be. I read book 1 of the series, called A Game of Thrones. I read book 2 of the series, A Clash of Kings, and then book 3, A Storm of Swords. And then that's where the month got complicated. And I am releasing this video a couple days before the end of the month. So what's happened here in the last weekend of the month, in the last few days, was that I've started up 3 books. I wanted to continue the series with book 4, but I also have 2 books from NetGalley that I really wanted to read and that I need to read and get the reviews out for. One of them was a non-fiction book called The King's Shadow. It's by Edmund Richardson. I was able to read that. It's great. It's a really interesting, well-researched story about a fascinating character. You would think you're reading fiction at a lot of points in this story, but it is actually based on a real story in history, and the author is good in the book since it is nonfiction, and authors who write these kind of nonfiction real stories often want to be clear, like, here's where we know for sure the information, here's where it's kind of fictionalized, we're not sure about it. So I did appreciate the way the author did the book, and it came together. The other book that I have started, in starting several books here at the end of the month, is a book I've been wanting, a book I've been looking forward to for a long time, a book I actually pre-ordered, so that when it is released on April 12th, I believe, I will get a physical copy delivered in the mail. It is the sequel to John Gwynn's book, The Shadow of the Gods. It's book 2 of the Bloodsworn series. It's The Hunger of the Gods, by John Gwynn, of course. And even though I just started, it's really good. I've enjoyed the characters from the first book returning. I've enjoyed the combat scenes. John Gwynn is very talented at weaving together the combat and the dialogue and the world building. Not just giving you big info dumps, but giving you a sense of the culture and the religion with the characters and the dialogue as they go on their journey. Even just from the beginning of it, I'm liking it. I was not able to finish that book yet, but as I said, there are a couple days left in the month, so it's possible that I will finish either book 4 of the Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire series, or book 2 of the Bloodsworn within the next couple days. It just depends on my mood, which one I want to prioritize, or maybe I'll finish them both next month. We'll see. That's one of the issues with me trying to read so many books at once. I really should probably calm down and just read one book at a time. But I'm eager to finish the books in A Song of Ice and Fire because I want to move on to some other series that I want to read. So those are the books for the month. We've got 16 books in the book battle, technically 17, but presented as 16. Let's go back up to the top and let's do the actual battles. Up first, we've got those Dane Cobain books. The Elitefold Mysteries book 1 and 2 are up against each other, Driven and the Tower Hill Terror. Out of the 2 books in the series, I did enjoy the first book more, so it's easily getting the win here and advancing to the next level of the tournament. I would encourage you, if you enjoy murder mysteries, you like private eye stories, to check out Dane Cobain's books and give these a read. I did see online that he's got a 3rd book in the series that should be coming out, if it hasn't come out already by the time of this video, should be coming out, and it is sort of like the Hercule Poirot thing. I believe it's short stories with the characters from the series. For the next pairing, we've got Come On Up to the House by Dane Cobain up against No Rest for the Wicked by Dane Cobain, both horror stories. Out of the 2 of these, I would say that I enjoyed Come On Up to the House a little bit more, well, maybe a lot more. Come On Up to the House is a creepy haunted house story, and I do enjoy creepy haunted house stories. There's a part in the book, I don't want to give you spoilers, but there's a part in the book where a character starts speaking in what some people might think is kind of nonsense, but it's like cosmic nonsense. The sort of thing you might see in a Cthulhu mythos type of book. And I really enjoyed those kind of scenes and the creepy atmosphere with the spirit and the house and all of that. Coming up in the next bracket, for the Leonard Cohen books, The Favorite Game and Beautiful Losers, they are lacking very much in plot, but interesting characters and thoughts. It was a lot more sexual than I was expecting it to be, so that was a shock. If you do not want to read books with a lot of sex in them and sexual reference and sexual discovery and all that, then you might not enjoy these books, but I thought it was interesting because it's about identity, figuring yourself out, and it's paired up against And the Hippos Were Boiled in Their Tanks by Jack Kerouac and William S. Burroughs. I'm going to give the win to that one. It is based on a true story, so it really is horrific, but it also is somewhat lacking in plot because it just kind of meanders around the like beat poets and kind of rebellious people in New York hanging out together, and you do get some of like people in the military kind of dodging their duties, and in the end there's a horrible crime that's committed and the potential cover-up stuff. They just kind of meander around until something huge happens and you deal with the after effects and the book's over. But still very interesting. You know, you don't always have to have the best plot of a book for a book to stand out, and this book does stand out for its significance in literature. Then between The Island of Dr. Moreau and The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, it may anger some people, but I'm not going to pick the classic by H.G. Wells to win this. I'm going to go with Silvio Moreno Garcia's update, her reimagining of the story. I do want to give you a warning. If you are expecting this to be a prequel to The Island of Dr. Moreau, that's not what it is. And if you're expecting it to be some sort of direct retelling, that's not what it is. Silvio Moreno Garcia reimagines the story and places it in a historical context in order to make it feel more realistic. It's got a very interesting romance story going on with it. It's got a very historical fiction feel to it, but it is ultimately still science fiction, and you do have the fun of the Dr. Moreau character and the creatures he's creating. But you don't have the character from the classic who gets shipwrecked and all of that. So it is a different story as reimagining, but it's getting the win here and advancing in the tournament. Going on to the next bracket, we've got The Guilty by James Patterson up against Poirot Investigates by Agatha Christie. Between the two of these, I enjoyed Poirot Investigates more. I feel like I probably shouldn't even recommend The Guilty to people. I mean, if you have an Audible subscription and you want to use a credit for it to get it or whatever, I suppose you could, but it might not be worth it. The issue that I had with it is that one of the actors in it is John Lithgow, and I really like him as an actor, but the twist in the story, the unexpected surprise, is based on an element that was given away by the fact, at least I was able to easily predict it. John Lithgow does the voice for what seems to be two characters, and so to me it was really obvious that it was his voice for that other character, which essentially gives away the twist because it's John Lithgow voicing both characters. They did such a good job of writing the annoying character dialogue that it actually is annoying, and that's my other main issue with The Guilty. So I guess by default Poirot Investigates wins that pairing. But also I enjoyed not all of the short stories, but a lot of the Poirot Investigates short stories in that collection. The next pairing is The Body in the Library by Agatha Christie up against a science fiction book by Michael Schotter called The Nemesis Effect. I appreciate that the author gave me a free ebook copy, wanted me to read it. I do believe that I enjoyed reading The Nemesis Effect more than I enjoyed The Body in the Library, and that's saying a lot because The Body in the Library is a really good Agatha Christie story. It's got good intrigue, good mystery build up. The way that Miss Marple comes across in that story is really good. The Nemesis Effect was a fun story to read. The world building, how it developed with the characters, just an ordinary guy figuring out what's going on with this company and the secret government project, basically. It was a fun build up. That brings us to our last bracket, our last two pairings. We've got A Song of Ice and Fire, Book 1 and 2 against each other. The win has just got to go to the first book in the series. Does such a great job establishing the world, the setting up all the political intrigue. It's fun to have that kind of political intrigue in a fantasy story. If somehow you are not familiar with this, my belief is that George R. R. Martin was taking history with the War of the Roses and kind of turning that type of situation situation into fantasy. And that's brilliant. I recently went through William Shakespeare's version of The War of the Roses with 8 plays. It was neat to see those kind of concepts turned into fantasy. And then for the next pairing, we've got book 3 in that series. It's called A Storm of Swords. It's up against a non-fiction book, The King's Shadow by Edmund Richardson. I enjoyed The King's Shadow a whole lot, but again, I'm going to give this win to A Song of Ice and Fire, Storm of Swords. This is a longer book. I'm enjoying A Song of Ice and Fire, though I've emotionally prepared myself for the fact that the series is unfinished. There are our winners from the prelims, the first round in our book battle. We now need to do our quarterfinals round. Heading back up to the top, we've got Dane Cobain's book, Driven, the first book in the Leafold Mysteries, up against Come On Up to the House, which is also by Dane Cobain. Dane Cobain versus Dane Cobain here. One of these two books is about to advance and make it to the semifinals. It is somewhat of a tough decision for me because the horror elements in Come On Up to the House were a whole lot of fun. And you may have noticed I didn't actually read any Stephen King this month. I know that's shocking. Like, here's where I'm getting my really good horror for the month. But ultimately, I liked the detective character and his assistant in Driven even more, I guess, than the characters who were in Come On Up to the House. Like I said, I enjoyed it as a good horror story. The family there weren't necessarily that likable, though, when I think about them and pair the books up against each other. We're going to have Driven advancing to the semifinals. Congratulations, Dane Cobain. Our next bracket, we have And the Hippos Were Boiled in Their Tanks by Jack Kerouac and William S. Burroughs up against The Daughter of Dr. Moreau by Silvio Moreno Garcia. If I was to put some random criteria in here to decide who advances, like which title do I like the most? Jack Kerouac took the title for their book from a newspaper headline, I believe, where there was a zoo where it actually happened very sadly. The hippos were boiled alive in their tanks. He saw the headline, put it on the book. My belief is there's something more symbolic there because I know a lot of people use the term hippo as slang for hypocrite. It could be that the title is symbolic when they say the hippos were boiled alive in the tanks. Perhaps it refers to the real life group of people who were involved in the situation being hypocritical and dying or being killed within their own environment for their own actions, or just because of the environment that they were in, that it was a situation where they were essentially metaphorically boiled alive. And that's very sad to think about. But I'm not actually going to decide this based on which title I like more. The Daughter of Dr. Moreau is also a neat title if I wanted to go there. But ultimately I enjoyed The Daughter of Dr. Moreau more, so it gets the bump up, advancing to semifinals. You may know, if you listen to my videos on a regular basis, Silvio Moreno Garcia is now one of my all-time favorite authors. She does a wonderful job with her books, and she writes different kinds of stories. Crime fiction, historical, horror, all kinds of great stuff. And here, science fiction. She's done science fiction and fantasy before with some novellas. I highly recommend her works. Daughter of Dr. Moreau is in semifinals. For our next bracket, we ended up with an Agatha Christie book, which I guess I shouldn't call it a novel really, it's a collection of short stories. Poirot Investigates, up against The Nemesis Effect by Michael Schotter. In the prelim round, Michael Schotter's book defeated another Agatha Christie, The Body in the Library. And really, The Body in the Library, in my opinion, is better than Poirot Investigates. So by default, it's a very easy win, in my opinion, for The Nemesis Effect to once again advance. So Michael Schotter's book is heading to semifinals at this point. If you enjoy books with characters who bond with other people, develop good friendships while they are discovering the interesting, weird science fiction elements of the world, then I think you'd enjoy The Nemesis Effect. Now for our last bracket, quarterfinals. It's A Song of Ice and Fire, Book 1, Game of Thrones, up against Book 3, A Storm of Swords, both by George R.R. Martin. This is a tough one. I have read online where some people say they like Book 3 more than Book 1 because of the advancement with the character development and the obstacles that some of the characters have to overcome. I'm going to go ahead and give it to book one, though. Once again, same logic as in prelims. To me, book one stands out for establishing the setting and what that they have there. Now we have our 4 books for semifinals. Let's take that moment that I like to take each month and just acknowledge how great it is to have these final 4. It's driven by Dane Cobain, The Daughter of Dr. Moreau by Silvio Moreno Garcia, The Nemesis Effect by Michael Schotter, and A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. These were my 4 best reads this month, and it is possible that I could give the win for best read of the month to any of these 4, but I'm going to make myself make some decisions here, so let's check on the advancements. From semifinals to finals, Driven against The Daughter of Dr. Moreau. One of them is an urban private detective dealing with a murder mystery with technology involved, and the other one is strange science fiction romance set in a historical Yucatan peninsula. Very weird characters there. I enjoyed both of these a whole lot, but since I have to make a decision, I'm gonna go with Silvio Moreno Garcia. Sorry, Dane Cobain, but The Daughter of Dr. Moreau is advancing this time. It is really intriguing how the romance is portrayed in that story, and I want to give the win to this one, I think, mostly because there's a character who is in the original Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells, who is portrayed in a much deeper, more complex way here with his alcoholism and everything he's dealing with, as he is a potential love interest for the daughter of Dr. Moreau. Oh, one of my cats wants to say hi. It's Jack. I don't know if he's going to meow or if he's just going to make a bunch of noises around the microphone. Hi, Jack. Our other pairing here for semifinals, we've got The Nemesis Effect by Michael Schotter, and it's up against A Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is hard to compete against. A Game of Thrones is going to advance to finals. It is such a complex story, so many interesting characters. For me, having just seen about a season and a half of the TV series, I felt like book one was much better than season 1 of the TV series. Though hopefully this summer, I will be able to go through and watch the rest of the TV series, and maybe I'll do another video. Maybe a video over the whole Game of Thrones Song of Ice and Fire series. We now have our finals. We know it's Silvio Moreno Garcia's The Daughter of Dr. Moreau up against A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. 2 very different books by 2 very different authors. Let's talk ideas and characters here. The daughter of Dr. Moreau is trying to figure out her identity. She's trying to grow as a person. I believe that the story does show the sexism of the time, with her character having to deal with how her father kind of keeps her there without letting her see the rest of the world. She doesn't have much of a sense of control over her own destiny, and she's trying to come to terms with that and trying to become her own person. And that's a really neat theme. That's a really neat idea for a main character. Though you see it in a lot of stories, the author does a really good job of it here. There is some action, there is some combat and excitement in the book as well, but it is a slower paced book. If you do not like slower paced, historical paced science fiction with romance in them, it might not be the book for you. But if you're willing to take in that slower pace and enjoy just small bursts of action along the way, I think you'd really enjoy the book like I did. And then you've got A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin, which does have some exciting combat in it. But again, it's not constant. A lot of what George R.R. Martin does in the book is character development, figuring out who these characters are and what motivates them. It's not necessarily a situation where I cared about all the characters involved, and from my beliefs, there's not one main character. Oh, my cat is now licking himself next to the microphone. I apologize if you can hear that in the video. Thank you, Jack. It's always nice to have you here during the show. To make this decision, I'm comparing a book that clearly has a main character, though several interesting characters with The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, as opposed to a book that has a whole lot of characters from George R.R. Martin. So it doesn't necessarily go as deeply into each of those characters, but it deals with issues of family and loyalty, and certainly a lot of themes about power, with different people wanting to control the kingdom or sit on the throne for different reasons. And I like that kind of political intrigue because you may want to root for different characters for different reasons, and that makes it a fun book to discuss with other people. This is the 3rd month of the year, and I have not yet declared a tie, so I'm going to let myself declare a tie this month. I'm going to say both books get to win as my best read of the month. I have a system set in place here so that the end of the year book battle actually has 16 slots, so I'm allowed 4 wild wild cards, and I can use ties for the wild cards. I'm going to put these 2 winners into the graphic for the end of the yearbook battle. And officially representing March, we'll go ahead and put the Daughter of Dr. Moreau, because that's the first one out of the 2. And then I'm going to put A Game of Thrones in the wild card number 1 slot, so that it'll be there in the 4th bracket. It was a really wonderful reading month. I read much more than I was expecting to. Let's go ahead and take a look at future reading for that TBR for next month, and perhaps some ideas for the upcoming months, because we have some readathons, read-alongs, reading challenges that have been announced. It's April 2022. I saw from Hugo at Scientist Reading World that there's a Continue-A-Thon going on, and the idea with that is that from April 2nd to April 15th, you are supposed to read books that are part of a series. Maybe you're going to continue a series, try to finish a series that you've started, and that's great for me because I need to do that. I've got a lot of series that I want to continue or finish. Technically, it's only the 2nd through the 15th, but I'm just going to do Continue-A-Thon for the whole month of April. I may just read books from series, no standalones at all in April, depending on how things go. I definitely want to read and or finish book 4 in A Song of Ice and Fire, and then book 5. That'll finish out the main series of what's been released. They do have prequels that have been published and a couple companion novels that talk about the world building and the history. I might look into those, but I may just finish books 4 and 5 and move on to other series. I also want to finish up book 2 of The Bloodsworn by John Gwynne, The Hunger of the Gods. It's been exciting starting the book and taking a look through it. I think maybe for my horror reading in April, I may want to return to Stephen King, because I need to read The Shining, and I've seen the movie, but I need to read the book. And then I have neither read the book nor seen the movie for Dr. Sleep. That would be a duology, and so I could get credit in the Continue-A-Thon for beginning and finishing a duology with The Shining and Dr. Sleep. There is a book out that I want to read by Seth Grahame-Smith. Been out for a while. It's called The Last American Vampire. It's the sequel to Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. It's got the same setting. I think it just progresses the storyline till later on. I thought that was very creative. For the Anne Rice novels, I've been wanting to continue that for a long time. I've only got the first 3 down. It would be nice to continue the series with The Tale of the Body Thief, Memnoch the Devil, and The Vampire Armand. A lot of people say The Vampire Armand is one of their favorite books by Anne Rice. After those 6 books, I think it would be great to read her witch series, The Mayfair Witches, because the vampire books and the witch books converge after that, and there are more books that are crossover with both the vampires and the witches in them. But I think probably 3 Anne Rice books would be enough for next month. I've already said a lot to read, but if I have time for it, who knows, maybe I'll actually get to some Murderbot books by Martha Wells. I've also been wanting to start the Malazan Book of the Fallen series. Once I finish A Song of Ice and Fire, I think it would be great to read Gardens of the Moon, the first book in that series by Steven Erikson. And then I can finally join that awesome group of Malazan booktubers here on YouTube. I'd love to join in on those discussions and have something to say about that series, other than that I've read the beginning with the maps and the list of characters and table of contents. After April, we're going to have for May Horror Mayhem. For Horror Mayhem, we are supposed to read shorter works of horror. The hosts are asking for week 1 to read supernatural beings or creatures, for week 2 to read gothic horror, week 3 cosmic horror, and week 4 more of folklore horror. But you know, the spirit of Horror Mayhem is just to read some horror in May. I think I can achieve all 4 of those weeks by finally getting through The Dark Descent, which Michael K. Vaughn said on his YouTube channel is probably the greatest collection of horror short stories of all time. Back when he said that in a video, at some point in the last year or 2, I bought that book, so I'd love to get through it. I've looked through the table of contents. It's huge. There's a lot in there. Some of those stories I've already read, but I think just reading that book for the month of May would get me through it. Though I will want to continue the Anne Rice books, I think May would be a good time to read The Witching Hour, Lasher, and Tau Thanatos, which are the Mayfair Witches books. Maybe I'll finally get to reading my Doctor Who horror stories collection, which is short stories about the different incarnations from the Doctor Who series. And of course, there are always more Stephen King books to read. I've got those Richard Bachman ones sitting on the shelf, collecting some dust, and I need to read them. And if I start the Malazan series in April, I'm definitely going to want to continue it in May, as well as June. In June, Michael K. Vaughan is sponsoring or hosting the June on the Range series, encouraging people to read Westerns, which I think is awesome. I've already read all 4 books in the Lonesome Dove saga, but I highly recommend them to anyone who's not sure what to read for June on the Range. In June, I have some books that are Maverick books from the Maverick TV series, inspired by that, or about the TV series. So I may read some of my Maverick books during June on the Range and continue with series that I want to read. Maybe I will also get to some Ken Follett books, some more historical fiction, even though they're not Westerns. If I'm reading Westerns, I might want to also read more historical fiction that month. And those Ken Follett books have also been sitting there for a while, not read. I loved Pillars of the Earth and World Without End. I think it would be great to read more Ken Follett. June is also probably going to be Summer of the Mammoths again, so those Ken Follett books are mammoths. They would be great to count for Summer of the Mammoths. And who knows how many more people are going to announce more readathons. A lot of great reading coming up. Hope you're excited about your reading. Hope you've enjoyed my reading wrap up for the month. Leave me comments down below. I greatly appreciate it. That's it for our book talk video today. Every Tuesday is a great Tuesday for a book talk. Peace.